Those groups and populations likely to be most harmed by climate change are the least responsible for causing it and have the least resources to cope with the consequences. That's the double injustice, and of course it's well known at the global level, and it's most egregious at the global level. But it does also exist within countries, both in the north and the south.
If we want the green economy to exist and to thrive and to make a difference to the world, we need to reinvent the way decisions are being made. We can't have experts who know everything and advise politicians who will then implement. The world is complex. There are lots of different knowledges that are needed in order to make those decisions. And citizens have to be very, very much part of the decisions that are made.
Who has power from the current status quo? Who benefits from the position now? Who profits from that, if you want to look at the economics of it? And who has the power to make those changes? And so the concept of power must be central to all of the analysis that we do as we look forward.
Too little participation by communities in government projects run the risk of projects being designed by a select few and not based on the realities of communities, and also using community latent capacities.
There is real knowledge, there are real propositions, there is a very complex and sophisticated analysis which is coming from the ground. But then, of course, we reach a certain point where there are institutional, governance, political power, all sorts of obstacles which intervene that stop those visions and stop those proposals from achieving some kind of globality.
We must focus on understanding what drives commitment to action in the international negotiations, at the community level, in national adaptation strategies. We have to understand what is driving the take-up of action.
The role of communities is very important in climate change. However, there must be a structured approach to participation. Community initiatives without the support of local government run the risk of an erratic approach that might not be sustainable.
There's a lack of long-term approaches to natural resource management, and what this means for Indigenous people is that it's very hard to develop long-term skill and career development, and also to have inclusion in the processes of natural resource management on their own land.
When governments are really up to listen from the people perspectives, they can be our allies. But the governments are very much captured by the corporations because they pay for the elections of any party, and the governments and our congresses are losing legitimacy.
There is not a tradition or a culture of collective decision making among the three levels of government.
Beyond that, states are weak both at the level of institutions and legitimacy.
So the question we've got to address also is how to get certain sectors of business or elites on board.
Private sector participation in RED is argued by some as essential to carry the cost of RED finance. The World Bank argues that the magnitude of finance required for RED, on the order of billions of dollars per year, requires the involvement of the private sector. Official development assistance alone will not be able to carry the weight. The question is therefore what will motivate the private sector to contribute to scale.
How do communities react with self-protecting measures against the self-regulatory market system?
What we might see is the latest iteration of a global movement for social transformation is the climate justice movement. So the kind of propositions that are coming from these organised movements on the ground are, on the one hand, directly addressing the real interests and concerns of their members, of the waste pickers, of the small-scale family farmers, of the groups in Thailand working for a real people-centred development as opposed to a low-carbon economy. The minimal platform allowed us to gather a lot of quite divergent forces at one moment in Copenhagen. But the minimal platform also meant that it was very difficult for this broad coalition to hang together for the long term, because there was no overarching narrative and no overarching strategy, which enabled us to move forward into different arenas, and once the going got a little bit more tricky and complicated.
So what we're looking for is ways of thinking about temporary solidarity for the purposes of social acting as if there were a dominant shared identity and set of common interests. And that seems to me to be the challenge.
Joined-up action refers to the key roles and relations of multiple actors, be they sort of more developmental or interventionist states, NGOs, social movements, sectors of business and international organizations. The need for broad-based civil society coalitions, involve grassroots organizations, NGOs, trade unions, social movements. The need for action across scales, local, national, regional, global scales. And the question of compromises and pacts with very different interest groups.
For participation to work, we need high levels of social capital. The level of social capital upon which communities can draw depends upon their existing economic, social and political resources. The higher the levels of social capital, the greater the likelihood participatory processes will support actions for the common good.
The focus currently in energy discourse is very much on individual choice, individual action, and individual change. And what I've found is that the changes needed really are institutional. Changes in laws and regulations, but really changes in values and norms. And I think you can only get to that through some kind of public discourse and debate.
There's been a tremendous sort of rise in the proportion of forest land around the world that's actually controlled by, even owned by, communities. And there's very strong empirical evidence that where you have these strong rights, that you tend to get more conserving kinds of practices.
People who are in government office, people who are citizens, whether they're organized or not, people who have expert knowledge can all come together, sit at the same negotiation table and discuss their different views. It will take a bit longer, but you cannot do away with this process. If you try to speed it, if you try to cut the corners, you will just have business as usual, and we won't go very far with that.
People are seeing this. People are on the streets reclaiming the streets. People are trying to look together, not like switch off television and go to the squares and talk to your neighborhoods. People are doing this. People are intelligent. We are in the process of raising our consciousness as one species of the nature.
So we need to begin to look more from the evidence about what unlocks that commitment, what unlocks that connection, whether it's within institutions or political leaders or individuals or communities. It's collective. It's about reinforcing actions at the community level and at the national action. Those are the kind of changes we have to unlock.
So these processes and these initiatives that actually get people to be the main characters of what's going on and to manage the project, those are perhaps the ones that get to the best results.